Welcome to Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release, a podcast dedicated to licensed wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians who support them. I'm your host, Gail Buell. Hey everyone, I am so excited because I get to talk to the Executive Director of the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, Kai Williams. And I've known Kai for a very long time, and she's been Executive Director for about 15 years at IWRC. And we get to hear the ins and outs and lots of different things about how the organization runs, what their mission is, their value statements, and a lot of the different, I want to call them products, that they produce. They're not just products. It is about stories. It's about collaboration. It's about producing things and meeting people where they are so that rehabilitators can learn how they need to learn to increase the professionalism of wildlife rehabilitation. Hi. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for recording this episode with me. I've been wanting to talk to you and talk about IWRC for a long time. So we're going to just get into it. So this is Kai Williams, Executive Director for IWRC. So before we get into all the nitty gritty with IWRC, I'm going to talk to Kai a little bit about her origin story. How did she get to this spot right now? So Kai, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Gail, and thank you for inviting me. This is so much fun to be here. I listen whenever I can to these, so it's fun to be on. Um, so my origin story with IWRC, I could start it a few different ways, but where my brain goes is honestly walking to the end of my driveway in high school to get the mail. We lived in a rural area in Wisconsin, had a driveway, it was, like about a third of a mile. So I'd walk down, and every once in a while when I'd pick up, this was in the mid to late 90s. And every once in a while when I got the mail, I would get the Journal of Wildlife Rehabilitation there because my mother was a wildlife rehabilitator and was a member of IWRC and NWRA. And she would get the journals. And for some reason, I distinctly remember reading a couple articles in the JWR by Marge Gibson, probably because Marge was somebody who was also in Wisconsin. And it was like, how can somebody in Wisconsin be part and writing for this international journal? And it was just kind of amazing to me. As this high school student, I'd be walking back up the driveway, kind of
Mhm.
reading through the journal sometimes, and I just have these very distinct memories. So to me, that's my IWRC origin story. But then there's obviously a long gap. I went and did other things. I went to college. I worked in environmental education. I worked for a food bank. I ended up working at a software company,
Wow.
and lots of different things. Gaining great skills along the way. And then I started volunteering for IWRC. And while I was volunteering, this was in 2009, I heard the executive director at the time, Jen Gerso, was gonna leave. She was planning on leaving. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. I was really not very happy at the software job I was at.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was very interested in applied for the program. I had this background knowledge of it, and I was having
Right.
fun volunteering and
Mhm.
was really looking for a change and to get back into the nonprofit world.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of my origin story.
Wow. So when did you become executive director?
2010. Yeah, so February
Wow.
of 2010.
Yeah,
So
you've been in the
it's
position for a
it's been a while.
while. But it's so awesome because really, I well, this maybe speaks to my memory not being
Mm,
so good, but I don't remember any other directors except for you. So so that's a great
crazy.
thing because I think that
Yeah.
you really directed and helped direct the organization in the right direction. But we'll be getting to that.
Well,
We'll be getting to that.
that's good
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah,
And I
that's good to
feel
know.
like the organization is obviously it's older than I am. I mean,
Hmm.
actually just in age, but I feel like organizations have they move and grow and change. And I've just been so lucky to be able to grow with IWRC. And that's
Right.
been really exciting, along with the amazing team here, just
Right.
seeing how we've all grown.
Right. Your origin story just really reminds me, I've been talking, this is our fifth season. I can't believe it, but I've been talking to a lot of people. And one of the things I find most interesting is talking about people's origin story. And one of the things that everybody has in common is it's a crooked path. It is not straight. It's crooked. And that's okay. And I think what you said resonated a lot with me because in my own journey, I felt the same thing is that I've taken away from my volunteer gigs and my jobs and things like that. I've always learned so much from those that I can bring forward, even into the world of doing wildlife rehabilitation or being the director of an international organization. So yeah, that stuff resonated with me because it's like, well, yeah, we're all like that. Um,
Yes, exactly. And you're reminding me too. I mean, just the last couple of days, I mean, almost every day, I end up talking to a couple of people who are wondering how to get into the field of wildlife rehabilitation.
mhm,
And sometimes they're retiring and they're looking for a second job, or they're
mhm.
changing careers midstream, and sometimes they're 16, 19, 21 and looking to get into a career. And so I have these conversations with people all the time about what do I do? What's the right way? And one of the great things I think about wildlife rehabilitation is there is no one right way. There are so many
Yep.
ways and entrances into it and things to try that can be very helpful to let people know. And it allows for our field to really have a great diversity, I think, rather than there
Oh,
being only
yeah.
one path in.
Right. I totally agree with you. I mean, yes. I mean, you're going to have to get a permit, so that structure is there. You're going to have to. There's a few things you're going to have to do, but I totally agree with you. I think there is many, and in rehabilitation too. There's many right ways to do something. There's wrong ways too, but there's many right
There
ways.
are, but there are more
Um,
that, yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
we're always learning.
I know. I know. So,
That's
and I think
that's why I stay in this. I love learning.
I know. And one of the things that we talk about with Partners for Wildlife all the time is how all the people we encounter, the program manager, Rob, is not a
Yeah.
rehabilitator. But he's wonderful and he's wonderful what he's
Hmm.
doing and everything. But and so encountering wildlife rehabilitators is new for him. And one of the things he repeats over and over and over again, and I know he believes, he's like, I cannot believe the lifelong learner energy that is in wildlife rehabilitation. And I love
Yes.
that too. And I'm the same. It's like, give me that book. I need that class. Ooh, what did you say? That we're all always doing that. And that in and of itself has certainly in my tenure being a wildlife rehabilitator, I have seen the growth in professionalism and all those kinds of things. Not quite exponentially, but it really everybody's like best practices, improve, let's this, let's that, not no, I'm only doing it on my own and no one else look at what I'm doing, I'm just doing it, I've got the best way and I'm not going to learn anything else. Don't hear that, at least not anymore. So
No, no.
I love it. And I wrote myself down a little question that I'm going to ask you later a little bit about, because being at an international organization, you are hearing things from all people from all walks of life and all different countries and everything and kind of the state of wildlife rehab. But we'll get to that later. That's just a teaser that
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
people listening, right?
Okay,
So
that sounds good. But you made me think of my why. We talked about my origin story,
yeah.
but I didn't really touch on the why I'm
Mm,
here. And
yeah.
it's what you just said. It's partly my desire to be a lifelong learner, but it's also so I was as an older high school student, and then in college, I
Hmm.
volunteered at a wildlife center.
Hmm.
I did education programs, I did quite a few things, but I one of the things I really did and really ended up enjoying was doing the songbird rehabilitation. That
Oh,
just ended up being an area. I went into it thinking I wanted to work with squirrels and raccoons and all of that, and
right.
and that was great. But where I really just found this interest and passion, partly because there was so much to learn, was in songbirds.
Yep.
And I was at the forums or whatever I could get onto at that time, and reading what books I could, finding any information I could. I wish I had today's resources, but I
Right.
still and when I started volunteering for IWRC again, I realized there were some people who were relearning the things I had learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we can do better than this.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make these things more accessible, help people find things. We should be helping people so they get this core knowledge earlier,
Right.
and then they can learn more things and then do better than
Mm-hmm.
where I was. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, passerine songbird rehab has come so far in the last 25, 30 years. It's fantastic. Um, and we just need to keep moving the needle. And so
Right.
that's my why for being here
Mm-hmm.
is, I came from a rural area that not a ton of resources.
Mm-hmm.
And IWRC and NWA were some of the things that helped me learn things. And it's like, how can we just keep people moving forward?
God, I love that. I love that so much because we don't, as a new rehabilitator, for example, we don't need to recreate the wheel.
Yes, exactly. And
We
it
just
shouldn't be
don't.
so hard to find these things. Sometimes
Exactly.
it's like this treasure hunt for people to get any of this information.
Mm-hmm.
So how can
Right.
we change that? Yeah.
And right, we don't need to do that anymore. There
Hmm.
are those ways, and those resources are out there now, and we just need to help get beginners kind of directed the
Exactly.
right way. So,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, chills up my spine. That was great. So let's now get into IWRC.
Yeah.
So before we start, what is the website?
It's the IWRC.org. And so that is THEIWRC.org. If you don't add the word the at the front, you will go to the Iowa Waste Reclamation Center.
I've done that so many times. I'm like, oh, IWRC just in the browser. It's like, what? That's not right. Oh, that's right. I have
Hmm.
to put
Yep.
the in front of it.
Hmm.
Okay, so uh, IWRC is the International Wildlife Rehabilitators Council, correct?
Rehabilitation
Thank
Council.
you. Thank
Yes.
you. Because I always, when I run through it really fast, I'm sure that I'm saying it one way or the other and probably the other, the wrong way. So
Oh, I can
Rehabilitation
tell you
Council.
funny stories from meetings.
The naming of things, right? And the word
Right?
rehabilitation in for what we do is not maybe not the right word.
I've wondered sometimes. I mean, it just,
Mhm.
there's different, it makes sense, I think, in many ways, but then there's connotations people have that are just like,
Right?
it's not intuitive to them.
It's not
Yeah.
intuitive. It's not intuitive. And it's kind of a long word, you know?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Rehabilitator, rehabilitation, all that kind of stuff. All my
Hmm.
my autocorrect, my spell checks and all that kind of stuff sometimes
All the
yell at
time.
me. Yeah, yell at me. Do you want a capital? Do you want not want a capital? Anyway, I digress. But maybe we should think about a different word besides rehabilitation, although it's pretty ensconced in our profession, but but still. Okay. So, let's talk about the origin story of IWRC.
Yeah. So IWRC, as far as I've had a lot of fun digging into some like
Hmm.
our early documents.
Hmm.
And the earliest meeting I could find for IWRC was in 1972.
Wow, I thought it was in
And
the 80s. Oh my gosh, that's
no,
amazing.
yeah. So 1972 is when the first meeting was.
Hmm.
Um, and what I gather from the notes is it really, oh, and I hope I get the spill name right, but I believe it came out of the Redondo spill, but a spill in the early 70s
Oh, an
in
oil
California.
spill.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
this is the spill that was the creation of IBR
Which is the
and
International Bird
Bird Rescue.
Rescue.
And they
Yep.
used to have a longer name, but they've IBR is a nice, yeah, International Bird Rescue. Um, but what I gather is around the time they were doing that, or just after they were doing that, and talking about we need this, they were also some of the people taking care of baby raccoons and doing other work like that. And they're like, wait, we need a group for this as well. And they
Hmm.
started having these conversations and meeting.
Hmm.
And it was in 1974, they submitted their incorporation paperwork. So they
Wow.
kind of had, it looks like they had a couple years,
Hmm.
as so many nonprofits do, of getting things organized and started. Submitted all their paperwork in 1974, started having board meetings. And then January 9th, 1975 is when they got their incorporation. So that's when they
Wow.
officially incorporated in the state of California
Okay.
was 1975. And so that's what we consider. So that's why we're celebrating our 50th.
Ah, yes, that
is
makes sense.
because we decided that was a good, there's so many dates to choose from, and it was like, well, let's do the date of incorporation. That just makes sense.
Totally makes
And
sense.
and it started in California. It was the Wildlife Rehabilitation Council at that
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And there was a lot of people in California and then one in Tasmania. So it actually was international from the very
From
beginning.
the start in
Yeah.
Tasmania. What? Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
wow. That is super cool.
So
That is
I
super
found
cool.
that, yeah, again, I love digging through all these historical
Mm-hmm.
things. So that was really interesting. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can just see every year from 1975 on, it grew. It started with like, I think there was 40 members, and then it just grew
Mm-hmm.
and grew and grew and grew. And gosh, I want to say it was 76 or 77 was the first journal, though I'd have to double check. We do have that on our website. We actually have archives of the journal going back to the very first one.
That,
I had,
I remember that, and
mhm.
that is, I just have to say, amazing amount of work to get
We had
that
a
done.
we had an incredible volunteer who
Wow.
scanned every single journal in and page by page. Yeah, this
They
was
need
a
a
labor of
medal.
love.
They
Uh-huh,
need a
I think
medal.
so. So that's pretty
Wow.
coh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But that's how we started, and it's just really fun seeing. And I read like Jay Holcomb, who was
Mm-hmm.
Jay Holcomb was one of our
IBR.
early
Mm-hmm.
presidents, like 5 or 6 years in, and I remember reading one of his journal editorials and
Mm-hmm.
thinking, wow, what they set out for IWRC is still what we're doing. And I thought
Huh.
I thought it was pretty cool that our mission has really, the wording of our mission and stuff has changed.
Sure.
But what our goal and our values and our vision is, I think has stayed fairly constant.
Okay. So what is the mission of IWRC?
Yeah, so we provide training and resources about wildlife rehabilitation
Mm-hmm.
worldwide for the
Mm-hmm.
purposes of improving wild animal welfare, conservation, human wildlife relations. That's kind of the process of it.
Sure.
I can read out the actual, which has some good words in it. There's a few words I missed
Ooh.
when I said. So let
Okay.
me read the
Okay.
actual one out. So
Let's get the actual. Yeah.
yeah, we provide evidence-based, that's one of the words I missed. So
Yep.
evidence-based education and resources on wildlife rehabilitation to move the field of wildlife rehabilitation forward, to promote wildlife conservation and welfare, to mitigate human-wildlife conflicts worldwide through better understanding of wild animal ecology, behavior, and welfare. And I would add to that, it's not just to mitigate human-wildlife conflicts, it's also kind of moving that needle to from considering everything as human wildlife conflict to human wildlife coexistence. So
Ooh,
if
we
we do
like
another
that.
change of
Yeah.
our mission in the near future, that might be something I suggest to the board we use because I think that's really getting at what it is. It's about,
Mhm.
as so many rehabilitators know, what we're working for. We're resolving conflict
Right.
and we're working toward coexistence by helping
Right.
everyone understand each other better.
Oh,
And
exactly.
obviously,
Oh, I
the
love it.
evidence-based is another huge part of our mission.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we went and read it out, and that we got that in there, because I think that is, especially in this day and age of, you can type anything into a browser, and especially with artificial intelligence, you actually don't really know what you're getting back.
Yes.
Because I'm old school and old and all that kind of stuff, I don't trust it. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to use my critical thinking skills. However, having that right in your mission statement really, I don't want to say forces you, but pushes the whole organization in a way that is that you are going to make sure that the information that you are giving out is appropriate and
Yeah, and the
evidence
best
based.
possible with the evidence and the information we have at that time, which doesn't
Right.
mean we might learn something in the future that's different.
Exactly.
Which
And
is
with
partly why
rehabilitation,
we're
yep.
always publishing and and adding new information and changing editions. And oh, that book needs to go out of print because now we know this. So
Right.
it's the
Exactly. That all speaks to best practices, right? So, for those listening out there, and you are like on a Facebook page that may not be a rehabilitation Facebook page, and you're like, well, what about that? Don't go to places like IWRC and say, is this what I should be doing? Because that as a resource is so comforting to me because now I don't have to go do the base research. I don't have to get a membership someplace so like and figure out how to use like the University of Minnesota Library or even like if you see Google Scholar, which can be very, very helpful. But still, you've got to parse through a lot of things. You can go to the IWRC and get a lot of that information there. And again, I love the fact that you're like, well, we need to shelf that book now and we need to redo it or update it or whatever because we have new information. And that's all about best practices. And that's what best practices is. And it just leads to that lifelong learning. There you go. It's a circle. It's a circle. Okay, so we got our mission. I want to dig into that mission just a tiny little bit. When you talk about your mission as far as conservation is concerned, what does that mean to IWRC?
I would say this is partly me talking, but me with years of talking to board
Yes.
and staff and our
Hmm.
members. So I think this is a fairly good estimation of it.
Hmm.
That for IWRC, conservation is not just taking care of animals that are endangered
Hmm.
or it's not just these very special specific animals. What conservation is for us is keeping an ecological balance in the world and ideally keeping animals from becoming threatened or endangered. Some of the animals people say, "Oh, well, your wildlife rehabilitation isn't a it's working with these common animals. Why do you need to do that?"
Hmm.
Well, look at the passenger pigeon, look at the cat
Hmm.
American kestrel, look at all these animals that were considered common at one point and then in some cases are just gone.
Right.
Um, and if we don't work with the people and with the animals that are here
Hmm.
when they're here,
Hmm.
there's going to be nothing left. For us, conservation is not just these specific animals or these specific environments. It's, it's the peregrine falcon in downtown Cleveland. It's
Hmm.
the kites in New Delhi. It's,
Hmm.
all of these animals are, it's the gray kangaroo in Australia. It's
Hmm.
animals that might be quite common, but are facing challenges every day. And for
Hmm.
us, conservation is keeping our environments, including our cities and our
Hmm.
urban, suburban areas, keeping all of it healthy and ecologically sound.
How you are a rehabilitation support organization.
Yes.
Okay. So in your mission, you have about conservation. So how does that conservation pair with the wildlife rehabilitators that you serve? How do you see it through the lens of a wildlife rehabilitation or wildlife rehabilitators?
In terms of what we do for them or in terms
Mhm.
of what they do?
Either one, because it's in your mission that you want to really help conserve, but uh, you're not
We're
like
not
the
working
pair.
directly with animals.
Right. You're not
Yes.
like the Peregrine Fund who has biologists in all these different places
Right.
and working with the California condor on the ground, right?
Yes.
That's
Okay.
doing conservation too. But
Yes,
you
absolutely.
are supporting wildlife rehabilitators in lots of different ways. So how does that conservation? I think it totally does. I'm not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like pushing back
So
on that at
I think
all.
oh, yeah. I think it's everything from when we're teaching classes, we're not just teaching people about the medical management of an animal. We're
Hmm.
teaching them about the ecology, to know the natural history, to understand all of that. And I think that can be a huge part, both for welfare and for conservation. If you're
Hmm.
just dealing with the medical matters, then you're not looking at the whole animal. You're not looking at how it lives in the environment. You're not looking at what it needs to do to be in that environment.
Hmm.
So by giving people some of that base knowledge, with one of our programs is a certified wildlife rehabilitator.
Oh, we're going to
And
talk
there's
about
been,
that.
okay, yeah, there's been a few times where I've had people like, oh, well, I'm I'm a veterinarian or I'm a this. This I should be able to just pass this exam. Like something is wrong with this exam if I can't pass it.
Ah, okay.
And but the challenge is wildlife rehab. rehabilitation, as we all know, is more than just the medical. So it has the ecology in there, it has
Mhm.
natural history, it has so many different aspects. And unfortunately, veterinarians aren't always taught about that. And so that's something that we help with in the wildlife rehabilitation
Mhm.
realm, bringing that information into the field. So I think that's one thing, just having that. It sounds so simple, but if you don't understand the ecology of the environment the animal lives
Mhm.
in, if you don't understand their natural history and their behaviors,
Mhm.
you know, when you look at wildlife rehabilitation as the goal of getting an animal to be able to successfully live in the wild
Mhm.
after something happens, that's integral. So I think that's one thing we really do. And another aspect of that, I would say, is actually post-release monitoring,
Mhm.
both in terms of us publishing materials. So,
Mhm.
being a place where people can publish research,
Mhm.
um, that I think is very important into conservation,
Mhm.
and also helping train people how to publish. And we do that in a couple of
Mhm.
ways.
Mhm.
Part of it is in our classes. We talk about the importance of post-release monitoring. We write that in our books. How do you do post-release monitoring? What are some of the considerations you need? And
Mhm.
then when we're doing the publishing of the journal, we are able, as a small organization who's member based, to walk people through that process a little more than some other journals might. So
Oh.
you don't necessarily need to be a PhD at a major university with all the things behind you in order to be able to publish with us.
Mhm.
You have to publish with us. You have to pass the peer review. So you
Right.
have to have the writing at a certain point. You have to have like you have to have the references. That is a huge thing. You
Right.
have to have the support for what you're doing. But maybe it's your first scientific paper you've ever written.
Mhm.
And the first draft is like, wow, there's some really important information in here,
Mhm.
but we need to work on understanding this. Like your methods just aren't clear enough.
Mhm.
And working to say, okay, can you clarify your methods and let's work on this? And then then go again. So
Mhm.
that sort of help and mentoring,
Mhm.
or maybe it's language. We do have an English language journal. And that can be challenging being international. So we
Right.
might have somebody who's got an excellent paper in another language, but when their ability to translate it in English is miss some things. So
Mhm.
we will take the extra time on copy editing
Mhm.
to work with them on that. And that's something I'm really, really grateful we're able to do. And
Mhm.
we see that as part of our mission as a member organization, both to get the information out there to our members, but also to help our members along in
Mhm.
being part of this field. Because just like what you were saying, not all of us have access to a university library system to
Mhm.
find all of this information. So how can we, how can we get there?
Mhm.
There's so much knowledge in the wildlife rehabilitation field. There's so much experience. How can we document that and share that out? Which
Right.
actually is another spot with conservation, I would say, is that we're helping the wildlife rehabilitators share their information with the broader community,
Mhm.
the broader wildlife research, disease, investigation, ecology, welfare
Mhm.
management community.
Mhm.
And I think that is very important because we're bringing that information that rehabilitators have, which is very valuable, and that data they have that I know you've
Mhm.
talked to several people about that is very
Yep.
valuable, and connecting that with the broader community.
Mhm. There's all kinds of things that were pinging off in my head as you were talking. That one of the things that I love is that you work with people that have not necessarily ever written anything like that. That could be so intimidating. Like, well, I'm not a professor. I don't know how to do a scientific paper, but you work with them. And I think that that is phenomenal because you're increasing their skills and their confidence, and you're getting information out there that needs to get out there. The post-release monitoring, as we all know, we need more and more and more and more of that to help us make evidence-based decisions on the wildlife.
Hmm.
I also like what you touched on with different species that you kind of highlighted as far as the conservation is concerned, is and like working with veterinarians that are maybe just dealing with the medical stuff. I don't know anything about the natural history, but I can fix this wing, and or maybe fix this wing, and the bringing the rehabilitators along, especially if they don't have that scientific thought process going into wildlife rehabilitation, right? Because I mean, I do have a degree in biology, but I'm not a PhD. I'm not anything like that. There's things that I understand better from the outset, but not everything, but better from the outset than somebody that's coming into wildlife rehabilitation and their main career before that was being an artist. But we can take their observation skills and we can take all these other things that they have, skills that they have, and kind of help them along so they understand how all these pieces and parts play in that one animal that they have at home, that baby skunk, that baby porcupine, that baby great horned owl, whatever it is, and how that knowing their natural history and all those other things help make that animal success back in the wild, but also how it impacts everything else. And I think that that is absolutely critical in this particular time we are on this planet, where so many species their populations are plummeting. We and wildlife rehabilitators are on the front line,
They
trying
definitely are.
trying to get more people, and professional organizations like IWRC can also, I think, and I think you do this already, is you are also on the front lines with helping other people outside of the wildlife rehabilitation community realize how we are on the front lines as wildlife rehabilitators and how the important role we play in conservation. We're
Agreed.
often the first group of people that see the diseases or see the weird things that are happening out in the world with wildlife. So I love all of that. I know it took us a few minutes to talk about it, but I think that also lends itself to know that this is not a simple blah 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 period and then we're done and we move on, because it shouldn't be, right? The mission statement should be pretty straightforward and easy to look at, but it's the devil's in the details here with that. So thank you for taking that time to really delve into that piece of the mission statement, because I think that it's really just super important.
And that actually that gets into one of our strategic objectives.
Oh,
So
it's
I
just
think
like
that
I
is really core
planned
to
it.
us.
You're just like,
I
I
was
was
like,
the
wait,
next question I was going to ask something about that. So go. Let's talk about your strategic objectives.
yeah. Well, we have four strategic objectives, and we've
Hmm.
really just talked about one that, if you ask me, it's probably the most important one.
Hmm.
And it's raising awareness to the
Yep.
general public, to the
Hmm.
wildlife rehabilitation community,
Hmm.
to the wildlife health and conservation community of the
Hmm.
needs of ill, injured, orphaned, and otherwise displaced wildlife, and and the rehabilitation community that serves these casualties.
Hmm.
And the next one, and that slides into the next one, which part of it is about IWRC. I mean, that's our organ, so
Yeah,
this is one of our
it's your org.
objectives,
Hmm.
obtaining recognition of IWRC programs. And part of the reason for obtaining that recognition of IWRC programs is the value of professional wildlife rehabilitation in general as beneficial to society via conservation, One Health, and animal welfare. And also that conservation, One Health, and animal welfare, you can't really have one without all three. Like
Without the other.
they
Hmm.
there's they connect.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's our second one. It's that recognition, that value of professional wildlife rehabilitation and how important that is to society via conservation, One Health, animal welfare.
Right.
And
Right.
then we kind of get into more nitty gritty. Our last two, our other objectives are a little more nitty gritty, providing basic and further education for
Hmm.
wildlife rehabilitators and others through
Hmm.
high quality science training courses, and advancing the field of wildlife rehabilitation globally through
Hmm.
quality science-based content and communications of new developments that affect the field. And I
Hmm.
think that's a really key part. And it goes back to what you said about you don't have access to all the journals and all the places and all the information. And certainly, a rehabilitator, especially in the busy season, does not have time to read
Right.
and parse through all of that. So if we can help distill some of that information and it takes more than one org to do this, to be honest. There's so much
Right.
out there. But if we can help share that information with people and how things happening in other fields and other areas affects us and affects the wildlife,
Mhm.
or things coming, that's part of the importance, I think, of us being a global organization is, unfortunately, as we know, diseases do not stay in one place. And,
No, they don't.
animals don't recognize borders.
Hmm.
You know, there's so many aspects of that. Right now, one of the concerns is the New World screwworm has been coming north. It used to be just in certain parts of South
Right.
America and slowly came into Central America, and now possibly more rapidly is in Mexico and coming in
Yeah.
possibly it's like 70 miles from the US border.
Yep.
And it's
So it's
also
basically here. We just haven't found it
basically
yet.
here in the US.
Yep.
And I looked, so I was, because I'd always thought of New World screwworm as something that mostly affected livestock.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, is this a concern mostly because of livestock and farming, or what is this? And so I started looking up papers, and I found papers about tapirs who succumb to this, and rehab centers get in because of this, especially even tapirs who lived in environments where they didn't think screwworm really existed, but
Right.
now it's at these different elevations. So it
Hmm.
was very interesting finding out, no, this is something that affects all of these animals. We might hear more about the livestock and the farming
Right.
because
Right.
that's where the news is going to be more interested, but it is affecting a lot of wildlife.
Wow. Yeah, I read about, we won't spend much time on the screw room because it gives me the willies. So
It's a Halloween story.
it is totally a Halloween story. And, we are close to Halloween when we're
Mhm.
recording this. So, uh, anyway, but it gives me the willies. Um, Parasites.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Let's move
They're
on from
fascinating,
that.
though.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's fascinating, but not.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, no, parasites are actually, their life cycles are pretty interesting, but it does give me the willies even thinking about
Yeah. We had a
like
coffee and
how,
tea yesterday on cicadas and just talking about disease and parasitism, even in insects,
oh,
and how
I
that
know.
cascades and affects everything. I mean, it's it's just amazing the connections between these things that you'd never
Uh-huh.
quite,
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
stop and think and look, and it's like, oh, whoa, that affects that and that. Okay.
So, in the naturalist world, and people who've listened to some of the episodes will recognize this. So, I'm also a naturalist, right? And so, in the naturalist world, we're always talking about, look, everything is connected. It is like a big old spider web, right? And you can pull on one thread, it might not do anything, but you pull on the main one, and you are affecting everything. And when One Health, kind of the phrasing and everything started coming on the landscape, I'm like, it's the same thing naturalists have been talking about forever. You know,
Yeah,
everything's connected. Everything's connected. And when we talk about One Health, we are really talking about all those different populations of wildlife, environment, livestock, and then humans, right?
agreed.
We can consider this whole thing a big old ship, this big Earth, and we're all in it together. So, but humans have an outsized, in a way, outsized influence on what happens to the other two. But in some ways, I don't know, these parasites. Okay, now we're going
Oh,
on to
yes.
something else. We're going on to
Or
something
back to parasites.
else. Back to parasites. Yeah, can't help it. Okay. Um, this is a little bit more run of the mill question about IWRC, but what is your org chart? What is your like staff, volunteers, board members? How many do you have? Well, those kinds of things. We know
Yeah.
you, but what about all the other positions that are going on in IWRC?
Yeah. So things change and move sometimes. Like right now, I'm since the pandemic, I'm the only full-time person. We're
Wow.
hoping eventually I would love to have that change and not be the only full-time person anymore. But
Yeah.
the exciting thing is we have 5 staff members.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yay.
yeah, it's really nice. And we've got a really great team.
Okay.
Um, so we have Julissa, who's
Okay.
our creative and programs director. Julissa's been with IWRC almost as long as I have, 2012.
Wow, that's
And
great.
she's another one who's got a really fun origin story because it combines veterinary technician and clinic management with graphic design and rural wildlife rehabilitation, and it's fun.
The number of
But so
skills she's bringing is significant.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's funny, she started, I think, in 2012, but she's like, oh, I took my first IWRC course in 2005. I took it from Rebecca McKeever. I have,
Oh,
like there's,
wow.
yes. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun. There's all those connections.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Stephanie Herman, who does both our membership and also does our content creation.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie's got a long and storied history in wildlife rehab at this point, working at many great places and with just a wonderful background. So we're so lucky to have her doing a lot of different. We put her to more jobs than I feel guilty sometimes. We put her to quite a few different jobs. Yeah, and then we have Samantha, who does our coursework and is just phenomenal in making sure all of the parts and pieces of that happen
Mm-hmm.
and happen timely, and the students get what they need, and the instructors have the information they need, and all of those logistics.
Wow. That's a
And
huge job too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And Catherine is helping us. We're really trying. We recognize the challenge that the world is in, and the wildlife rehabilitation field is in so many ways, including funding and income. And as
Mm-hmm.
we're a global organization, and it's hard enough in the economy of the US to pay for some of these classes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the global South, it can be even harder. You're looking at a month's salary to pay for a
Ah,
class.
right.
That's not reasonable to ask somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with Catherine to try to open more areas of funding so we do less fee for service work. That's a really big challenge for us, is that we're doing so much fee for service, and we keep everything as tight as possible, as minimal as possible.
Sure.
We subsidize as much as possible, but we really would like to be subsidizing more because
Mm-hmm.
we recognize there's a whole population who we're not able to reach just
Right.
because of cost and funding.
Right. Right. Um,
So that's our
uh,
staff. And then, yeah, and then
okay.
we have our wonderful board. So right
So,
now we have 12 members on our board.
mm-hmm.
Let's see. We're about to shift boards soon as the year changes, but right now we have board members in, I think, 2 continents and 4 countries.
Holy cow. That's a
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
lot to organize too. Oh, wow.
And
That's
yeah, we
amazing.
usually have board members on 2 or 3 continents
Mm-hmm.
and 3 to 5 countries. So
Okay.
it's always, yeah, it gets very challenging when we have people. It's always the best when we have people spaced around the world, but it's also challenging
Mm.
because somebody's always going to have the board meeting at a really bad time for them.
Right. Then midnight.
It's just, yes, it's inevitable. So we've tried many different things to kind of help alleviate that over time.
Right. Right. Oh yeah, all a lot of the things that you're doing are logistical craziness. The logic puzzles are crazy and
Yes.
everything, but you've figured it out and you have to keep changing and working with that, but more power to you. I couldn't do it. Okay, so you have the board of directors, you have the staff that you described. And so volunteers. Now,
Oh, yes.
are the board of directors, are they volunteers?
They are volunteers.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the board of directors is volunteers. And then in addition to the board volunteers, we also have it moves and changes, but we have at least 50 volunteers at any given point in time.
Okay.
Um, and some of them are wildlife rehabilitators, and they're volunteering their knowledge and their skills in wildlife rehab or just their time. Sometimes they're doing something like I explained with the journal, where it seems so boring and so mundane, but it's
Mhm.
valuable, and it has value for years after they've done
Right.
it. I mean,
Mhm.
years. And then we also have volunteers coming in from other professions. So we love it when we can get like marketing or communications volunteers, because so much of what we do and so much of what wildlife rehabilitators do is about communicating out knowledge and information and
Mm-hmm.
making things accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and data, and we're in a digital world.
Right.
So we have some pretty amazing volunteers in technology who help us
Sure.
with things. And that's part of how we're able to do stuff with the staff we have. I
Sure.
think people are often surprised by how, if you look at our staff as an FTE, which is the full-time employee,
Please.
so
Mm-hmm.
what the equivalent is, I think it's 3.2, something like that.
Wow. That's
So when you look at what we
significant.
do
Mm-hmm.
with that, it's because of all of our amazing volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also because of those tech volunteers who allowed us to not have to type in every name and everything, and then also make those errors that humans inevitably
Oh,
do when we're
right.
typing
Right.
things in.
Mm-hmm.
But to have that automation do that, so we can instead be on the phone talking to that prospective rehabilitator who's trying to figure out what is the difference between certification and licensing and permitting and
Yeah. What does it
education
all
and
mean?
what is it that
Yep.
I need?
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah. I knew it was a pretty tight ship, but that's a really tight ship.
Yeah, it's it would be better if it wasn't quite so tight. But
Quite so tight.
that's a little, yeah. But I believe in transparency, and that's where we're at right now. And so we do everything we can with what we have available. And
Right.
part of the challenge is just deciding what to prioritize with that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And all of us need to do that, whether we're in-home
Oh, yes.
rehabilitator or whether we're a big organization or an international organization serving wildlife rehabilitation. So totally, right? It's yours is resource based, just like everybody else, and resources are not just funding. Resources are people. Resources are spaces. So it's always about
All of
that.
those things.
All those things all the time. I want to thank Kai Williams. She's the executive director of the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, and we had a wonderful conversation about the IWRC. Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release is a production of Partners for Wildlife, working hand in hand with wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians to support them to improve the welfare of orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife. Our executive producer is me, Gail Buell. I'm the partnership coordinator for Partners for Wildlife with the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine. Our producer is Reese Rosado.